March 15th, 1943. U-247 slipped beneath the dark waters of the Bay of Biscay at 0200 hours, her diesel engines falling silent as electric motors took over. In the cramped conning tower, Oberleutnant Zur Klaus Hoffmann pressed his eye to the periscope, scanning the moonlit surface for the silhouettes that had become the nightmare of every U-boat commander. The aircraft that prowled these waters day and night, armed with radar sets that could detect a surface submarine from 20 kilometers away, and depth charges that could crush a boat's hull like an eggshell. What Hoffman couldn't know as he adjusted the periscope's focus was that he was about to experience 18 months that would transform him from a confident hunter into a desperate survivor. The war diary he would keep, written in careful script during stolen moments between watch duties, would document not just tactical encounters, but the systematic Kriegsmarine's most destruction of the feared weapon. The pages that survived the war, discovered decades later in a sealed container recovered from U-247's final resting place, tell a story that contradicts every assumption the German High Command held about submarine warfare submarine warfare were being rewritten in 1943. The mathematics Allied favor, not through superior, but through technological advantages, seamanship or courage so overwhelming that German submariners found themselves fighting a war they could no longer understand. In Hoffman's meticulous entries, preserved despite salt water and time, we discover how the Bay of Biscay became a killing ground, where experienced crews learned that everything they knew about underwater warfare had become obsolete overnight. The transformation began with a single radar contact on that March morning. Hoffman's diary entry, written in the abbreviated style of a professional naval officer, recorded the moment when certainty gave way to confusion. Aircraft contact, bearing 270 degrees, range unknown. Crash dive executed. No depth charges dropped. How did they find us? This question, repeated with variations across dozens of entries, would haunt U-boat commanders throughout 1943 as they discovered their enemies possessed detection capabilities that German intelligence had never imagined possible. To understand Hoffman's growing desperation, we must first comprehend what submarine warfare represented to the Kriegsmarine in early 1943. The U-boat arm remained Germany's most successful naval weapon, having sunk over 14 million tons of Allied shipping since the war began. Commanders like Hoffman had trained for years to master the complex art of underwater warfare. They understood ocean currents and thermal layers, could calculate torpedo firing solutions in their heads, and had memorized the acoustic signatures of dozens of Allied warships. Yet none of this experience prepared them for what they encountered in the Bay of Biscay during the spring and summer of 1943. Hoffman's entries document a systematic education in technological defeat, beginning with encounters that defied every principle of submarine detection he had learned at Naval Academy. Submerged at 0400 hours under perfect dark water conditions, he wrote on March 22nd, surfaced at 2100 hours to charge batteries. Aircraft attack commenced within 4 minutes of breaking surface. Impossible according to all doctrine. They are using methods we do not understand. The Bay of Biscay had become crucial to U-boat operations by 1943 because it represented the only route between German bases on the French coast and the Atlantic hunting grounds where submarines could still find merchant targets. Every U-boat departing for patrol or returning from operations had to transit these waters. What German naval planners hadn't anticipated was that this geographic necessity would allow Allied forces to concentrate their anti-submarine efforts in a relatively small area where every U-boat could be detected, tracked, and attacked. Royal Air Force Coastal Command had transformed the bay into a surveillance zone covered by overlapping radar patrols 24 hours a day. The aircraft Hoffman encountered weren't random patrols hoping for lucky sightings, but elements of a systematic hunting operation guided by intelligence sources and detection technology that German commanders couldn't comprehend. His diary entries from April 1943 document growing bewilderment as seemingly impossible encounters became routine. April 8, 1943. Submerged Patrol Day 3. Attempted to surface for battery charge at 2300 hours. Sunderland flying boat appeared from nowhere. Forced immediate crash dive. No moon, heavy cloud cover, visibility near zero. How are they finding us? Hoffman's training had taught him that aircraft detection depended on visual contact, that submarines operating on dark nights with poor visibility enjoyed virtual immunity from air attack. The discovery that Allied aircraft could locate surfaced U-boats, regardless of weather conditions or visibility, shattered fundamental assumptions about submarine warfare. The technological gap that Hoffman was documenting went far beyond simple radar detection. Allied forces had developed integrated systems that combined radar, sonar, radio direction finding, and signals intelligence into comprehensive anti-submarine warfare networks. When U-247 surfaced to charge batteries or transmit position reports, multiple detection systems registered her presence simultaneously. Radio transmissions were intercepted and analyzed. Radar contacts were plotted and tracked. Intelligence analysis predicted likely submarine routes and operating areas. Most devastating of all, the Allies had broken German naval codes, allowing them to read U-boat radio traffic in near real time. When Hoffman transmitted his position reports to headquarters, Allied intelligence centers received the same information within hours. His submarines' movements, planned attacks, and fuel status were known to enemy forces before his own commanders could respond to his reports. The hunting groups that appeared with seemingly supernatural timing weren't lucky by information that made they were guide U-boat operations predictable and vulnerable. Hoffman's entries from May 1943 document the psychological impact of fighting an enemy who appeared to possess impossible capabilities. May 15th, 1943. 7th day submerged. Battery power critical. Must surface tonight or lose boat to electrical failure. Aircraft waiting when we broke surface. They knew we were coming. How can they know everything? The strain of operating under constant surveillance began affecting crew morale and decision-making. Commanders found themselves second-guessing fundamental tactical choices, paralyzed by the knowledge that every move might be anticipated. The depth charge attacks that followed detection demonstrated another technological advantage that German submariners struggled to understand. Allied aircraft carried new weapons that exploded at predetermined depths, creating multiple pressure waves that could damage submarines even at considerable distances. The random depth settings that had characterized early war anti-submarine attacks gave way to coordinated patterns calculated to maximize damage against submerged targets. Hoffman's technical descriptions reveal an officer trying to understand weapons that exceeded German capabilities. Depth charges exploded in sequence at what appeared to be 50-meter intervals from 30 to 150 meters depth. Pattern-covered area approximately 400 meters square. Damage to hull plating, electrical systems, and diving controls suggests explosive force greater than standard Allied weapons. Are they using new charges? The answer, unknown to Hoffman, was that British scientists had developed more powerful explosives and sophisticated fusing systems that turned depth charge attacks from area bombardments into precision strikes. By June 1943, Hoffman's diary entries reflected complete tactical confusion. The principles of submarine warfare that had governed U-boat operations since 1939 no longer applied in the Bay of Biscay. Submerged operations that should have provided safety resulted in detection and attack. Surface transits that had been routine became suicide missions. Even the most experienced commanders found themselves unable to predict enemy responses or develop effective countermeasures. June 3rd, 1943. Return passage day 12. Attempted night surface transit using new route recommended by headquarters. Attacked by coordinated air and surface forces within 2 hours of breaking surface. Lost port diesel engine to shrapnel damage. Forward torpedo room flooding controlled, but boat compromised. They are everywhere. We cannot hide. The desperate tone of this entry captured the reality facing U-boat crews throughout 1943. They weren't just fighting superior numbers or better weapons. They were confronting an enemy who had solved the fundamental problem of submarine detection. The systematic nature of Allied anti-submarine operations became clear to Hoffman during his final patrol in the Bay of Biscay during July 1943. His entries document encounters with multiple aircraft types, coordinated surface vessel attacks, and detection methods that seemed to violate the laws of physics as German submariners understood them. July 12, 1943. Outbound Patrol Day 6. Attempted standard evasion pattern recommended by Lorient Tactical Staff. 3 aircraft contacts in 4 hours, all resulting in forced dives. Battery charge now at 30%. Beginning to understand we are not fighting individual patrols, but coordinated system. Hoffman's growing comprehension of Allied capabilities marked a turning point in his understanding of the war at sea. The random encounters he had initially attributed to bad luck were revealing themselves as elements of a comprehensive surveillance network that covered every square kilometre of the Bay of Biscay. The crew of U-247 began noticing patterns that suggested their enemies possessed information beyond what detection technology alone could provide. Aircraft appeared not just when the submarine surfaced, but precisely when battery levels forced surface operations. Attack patterns seemed calculated to drive U-boats towards specific areas where other Allied forces waited. Radio intercepts, previously dismissed as routine enemy chatter, began including details about German submarine movements that should have been impossible for outsiders to know. Chief Engineer Obermaschinist Werner Schulz, a veteran of 32 patrols who had served on U-boats since 1940, confided his concerns to Hoffman during a whispered conversation in the engine room on July 18th. The older man had noticed that Allied aircraft responses seemed too precise, too well coordinated to result from chance encounters. Herr Oberleutnant, Schulz said, they know our procedures better than some of our own crew members. When we dive, they wait exactly where our air bubbles will surface. When we change course, they adjust their search patterns before we complete the turn. This observation, recorded in Hoffman's diary that evening, highlighted a truth that German naval intelligence was struggling to accept. The Allies weren't just detecting U-boats through superior technology, they were predicting submarine behavior through comprehensive analysis of German tactical doctrine. Every procedure taught at submarine school, every standard response to enemy contact, every routine operational pattern had been studied and anticipated by Allied anti-submarine forces. The psychological warfare aspects of this technological superiority became apparent during August 1943 operations. Allied aircraft began dropping propaganda leaflets alongside depth charges, documents that contained detailed information about individual U-boats and their crews. Hoffman's diary entry from August 6th described finding waterproof containers floating near U-247's position that contained accurate crew rosters, photographs of German submarine bases, and personal messages addressed to specific officers by name. August 6, 1943. Recovery of enemy propaganda materials reveals they know our boat number, crew composition, and operational history. Document addressed to me personally mentions my hometown and family members by name. This is psychological warfare of unprecedented sophistication. How much do they actually know about our operations? The answer, which Hoffman could not have imagined, was that Allied intelligence possessed more detailed information about U-boat operations than many German naval headquarters staff. The tactical adaptations that German submarine commanders attempted during late 1943 only highlighted their technological disadvantage. New diving procedures designed to minimize radar exposure were countered within weeks by improved Allied detection methods. Modified surface transit patterns that should have confused enemy tracking systems resulted in more precise intercepts rather than successful evasions. Every innovation in German submarine tactics was met by corresponding improvements in Allied anti-submarine capabilities. Hoffman documented one particularly devastating example during his September 1943 patrol. Following new instructions from Admiral Dönitz's headquarters, U-247 attempted a deep submerged transit through the Bay of Biscay, remaining underwater for 6 days while running on batteries at minimum power. The technique, theoretically invisible to surface detection methods, should have allowed the submarine to cross Allied patrol zones undetected. September 14, 1943, Deep Transit Day 6, forced to surface due to battery exhaustion at position calculated to be beyond enemy patrol coverage. Surface contact established within 12 minutes. Destroyer appeared from bearing we had not observed during periscope observations. They were waiting for us at precisely the location where our battery endurance would force surfacing. This encounter demonstrated that Allied forces could calculate German submarine capabilities more accurately than German commanders themselves. The autumn of 1943 brought reports from other U-boats that confirmed Hoffman's observations about Allied technological superiority. Submarines throughout the Atlantic reported similar experiences with impossible detection, coordinated attacks, and enemy knowledge of German procedures. The monthly loss rates that had remained manageable throughout 1942 began climbing toward unsustainable levels as Allied anti-submarine warfare reached full effectiveness. Commander Hinrich Layman Villanbrock, one of Germany's most successful U-boat aces, visited Lorient base in October 1943 and met privately with Hoffman and several other commanders. His assessment of the strategic situation, recorded in Hoffman's diary, provided professional confirmation of what individual submarine crews had been experiencing for months. October 22, 1943. Meeting with Kaliu Layman Villanbrock confirms our tactical observations are representative of fleet-wide problems. Enemy detection capabilities have achieved technological breakthrough that renders traditional submarine warfare obsolete. Unless countermeasures are developed immediately, U-boat arm faces systematic destruction. This stark professional assessment marked the moment when experienced German naval officers acknowledged that their primary weapon system had been neutralized by Allied technological superiority. The winter operations of 1943 to 1944 demonstrated that German attempts to adapt submarine tactics could not overcome the fundamental disadvantage of fighting an enemy who possessed comprehensive intelligence about U-boat capabilities and operations. New Snorkel breathing apparatus that allowed submarines to run diesel engines while submerged reduced battery charging requirements, but created new detection signatures that Allied forces quickly learned to exploit. Hoffman's diary entries from December 1943 documented the first use of Snorkel equipment aboard U-247, revealing both the promise and limitations of German technological responses to Allied advances. December 8, 1943. First operational use of breathing mast allows diesel operation at periscope depth. Battery charging completed without full surface exposure. However, equipment creates wake disturbance visible to aircraft and electromagnetic signature detectable by enemy sensors we do not understand. The Snorkel system, while revolutionary in concept, arrived too late and with too many operational limitations to restore German submarine effectiveness. Allied radar operators quickly learned to identify the distinctive wake patterns created by Snorkel masts. Improved sonar systems detected the unique acoustic signatures of submerged diesel operations. Most critically, the limited speed and maneuverability of Snorkel-equipped submarines made them vulnerable to coordinated attacks by surface vessels guided by airborne spotters. By February 1944, Hoffman's entries revealed a submarine service transformed from hunters into hunted. The confident predators who had terrorized Allied shipping in 1942 had become desperate survivors struggling against technological forces they couldn't comprehend or counter. His February 15th entry captured this transformation with brutal clarity. Patrol Day 18. Third forced dive in 6 hours. Crew exhausted from constant diving stations. Batteries at 15%. We are no longer hunting enemy shipping. We are simply trying to survive passage through waters we once controlled. The spring of 1944 brought new Allied innovations that further reduced German submarine effectiveness. Hoffman documented encounters with aircraft equipped with searchlights so powerful they could illuminate submerged submarines at depths previously considered safe from detection. These Lee lights, as Allied forces called them, eliminated the darkness that had been the U-boat's primary ally during surface operations. March 22nd, 1944. Night surface charging interrupted by aircraft with searchlight of incredible intensity. Illuminated entire submarine from altitude of approximately 800 meters. Light penetrated water to depth of 10 meters during crash dive. No place to hide from this technology. The psychological impact of being illuminated underwater struck at the very core of submarine warfare doctrine, which depended on concealment for survival. Even more disturbing were reports from other boats about new Allied weapons that seemed to track submerged submarines independently. Acoustic torpedoes that homed in on propeller noise, depth charges that adjusted their explosion depth based on target movement, and sonar buoys that could be dropped by aircraft to create underwater detection networks. Each innovation further restricted German operational options and increased the lethality of Allied anti-submarine forces. Hoffman's technical curiosity, evident throughout his diary, led him to analyze these new weapons with the detachment of a professional naval officer, even as they threatened his survival. April 8, 1944. Acoustic torpedo passed beneath boat at depth of 60 meters. Weapon appeared to adjust course twice during attack run, suggesting guidance system more sophisticated than simple noise-seeking mechanism. Are they using remote control or automated targeting? The questions revealed an officer trying to understand technologies that German science hadn't yet developed. The crew's morale, documented in Hoffman's private observations, began deteriorating as the impossibility of their situation became apparent. Veterans who had survived dozens of patrols spoke quietly about requesting transfers to surface vessels or shore duty. New crew members, fresh from submarine school, arrived with training that bore little resemblance to the reality of operations against Allied forces equipped with advanced detection systems. May 1st, 1944. Conversation with Chief Torpedoman Huber reveals declining confidence among experienced crew. Men who once boasted about sinking enemy tonnage now speak only of reaching home port alive. New arrivals from training command possess theoretical knowledge completely irrelevant to actual combat conditions. The transformation from elite volunteers to reluctant survivors reflected the broader collapse of German submarine effectiveness. The tactical situation continued deteriorating through summer 1944 as Allied forces introduced coordinated hunting designed to exploit German submarine groups' specifically limitations. These hunter-killer formations combined aircraft, destroyers, and escort carriers in integrated operations that could pursue individual U-boats for days across hundreds of miles of ocean. Once detected, German submarines found themselves facing sustained pressure that their limited battery endurance and underwater speed made impossible to escape. Hoffman's final entry, dated August 12, 1944, as U-247 limped back to Lorient with severe battle damage, captured the complete transformation of submarine warfare in a single haunting sentence. We who once ruled these waters now pray only to cross them alive. His meticulous documentation reveals how technological superiority, not courage or seamanship, determined the outcome of the Battle of the Atlantic. The hunters had become the hunted.